Now you can imagine how Noah felt when God told him it's going to rain, and it's going to be devastating. Now the problem was, how long did it take him to build that ark? 100 years. So it took him 100 years to build that. So by the time it was ready, he was like, not a spring chicken. But nonetheless, was he blessed? Yes. Was his family blessed? Yes. All his family was taken care of because of his stand on God's what? Word. And this is what we don't grasp the magnitude of this. God is not way off in some other planet or something. God is right here with us. And we need to acknowledge him and walk in his what? Shadow. That's the covenant of what? Mantle, right? So when you walk in the covenant mantle, then what happens is you have to be protected. If you're making the commitment to God, then God's response. Don't worry about God's responsibility. God has got his job. You have to do what? Your job. Now, there's two words in the Bible. There's one that's called phileo, and the other one's called agape. Now, when you seek approval of someone, that's the word phileo. They're both translated love, but that's totally inaccurate. So let me explain about agape and phileo, all right? Agape is when you have to think, how many have ever worked for somebody? Anybody ever worked for somebody? All right, now when you work for somebody, they hire you, and that is phileo. Now, the problem comes up is what happens for you to stay in that job. You have to think like the owner. You have to act like the owner would act, and you have to have the owner's priorities. Yes or no? Now, he doesn't want you to have it all the time. He just wants you to have it while you're being hired. So now that ability to have to change your reality, change your perspective, change your priorities, that's agape. Has nothing to do with love. Phileo is seeking someone's approval. So when a person hires somebody, then he is showing phileo. He's giving him the opportunity. He's giving him the benefit of the doubt. But what happens is people go, all right, I'm hired. And they don't show up for work. And they expect to still get what? Paid. They don't even show up for work. So what do you do with that person? They're gone. They're terminated. And this is where you see in the Bible, God says, okay, here's the job you've got. Here's what you need to do. And people go, well, you called me, you hired me, so I don't have to do anything. I'll just show up for my paycheck. No, it doesn't work like that. You're expected to do things the way God wants it to get God's benefits. So when you accomplish those, a parent will give child chores to do. Not more than he can handle, just enough. How many I remember my teaching I gave on the different mantles. So you give a child a job, and if he does a good job, he gets right? You reward him. That's phileo. What his job is to do it the way, what? You want it done, right? The child has to do it the way you want it done, how you want it done. And when he doesn't, you give him what? Reproof and what? Correction. Why? Because you want him to be more responsible. You want him to be more skilled, more ability, more able. And if he refuses to do it, there's some negative aspects to that. He's not going to get the rewards and benefits. So this is the book of life. That's why it's called the way, the truth, and the what? Life. It has everything to do with life. All things that pertain to life and what? Godliness. That's in here. It's a very small book, and all my whole library, if I have, is just to understand this book. Culture, customs, figures of speech. What is the reality of things? So, all right. So, Father, I thank you right now for helping me to teach your word to those who are doing their best to stand, for them walking in the greatness of your shadow, to be able to walk with integrity, and to be able to truly rise up and to grow into the fullness of the blood covenant, to walk as your firstborn from the dead, our risen and returned Lord Jesus, your anointed. All right, so let me go into something really fascinating, because the whole Bible is dealing with some really interesting things, because if you have something that you believe, right, you have to put it to the test. And any good scientist knows that everything, any supposition, hypothesis has to be falsifiable. Do you understand what falsifiable means? You put it to the what? To the test. It has to be falsifiable. So if you believe something, then how do you know that it's right? You put it to the what? To the test. People say, well, I know what's going on. Really? All right, put your money where your mouth is. Now invest. How are you investing? How are you preparing for this? And they're not doing anything. So they're not even thinking. Their concept of reality is twisted. They don't want it to test it. I have spent my whole life testing this. What is wrong? What if I do what it says and it doesn't get? Okay, what happened? What did I do wrong? What did I not understand? And I'm like, wow. And I'm so thankful I spent 14 years in Asia, making a complete idiot of myself, but not understanding the culture. And understanding it helped me understand this, which is to what it's written to. So let's look at a very interesting verse. Now, if you are an employer and you have someone who's your employee and he's your star employee, he really does things the way you want it, how valuable is he? I mean, when you can turn the whole business over to him and he works it flawlessly, that person is priceless. And in the Bible culture, that's called an Azir, where you can give someone a job and they'll do it as good or better than you. That's what God's looking for, Azirs. The best God's ever had is Jesus. Well, has there been anyone else? Well, David did a pretty good job. And I'm going to show you why it's important, how God is able to take care of those. He's not arbitrary. He takes care of those who are under his shadow, not those off in left field or right field or the parking lot. God only concerned with those that are in his shadow. If I told you that, 19,000 people died during the earthquake in Thailand, and you go, okay. But if you find out your dog died, it's like, oh, my dog died. Like, what happened? You're more concerned about a dog than 19,000 people? The 19,000 people meant absolutely what to you? Nothing. But that little pooch meant what? Why? Because he's under the shadow of your roof. That's your little puppy. What was it? They had John Wick, right? They killed his puppy. He's like freaking killed everybody. You killed my puppy. But you understand, if it's under the shadow of your roof, it's under your protection, and you protect it. You care about it. You provide for it. You look under the shadow of my roof, we got plants. Notice that they're green. They're not dead. Why? Because they're under the shadow of my roof. I got a dumb fish in an aquarium. We protect him. We take care of him. Why? Because he's a dumb fish. No, he's under the shadow of my roof. You understand? When you guys are under the shadow of my roof, I'm responsible for you. God holds me accountable for your lives. And people don't understand why. Why do you act the way you do? Well, what was it? We had an accident out here. Someone backed their car into another person's car. So guess who paid for it? I did. Why? Because it's on my property. I'm responsible for everybody here. So if you're sick, I'm responsible for you. If you're hungry, I'm responsible for you. I'm weird, I know, but that's what the word says to be. And of all the people on earth, who's really trying to learn God's word? Who really cares? Who's willing to put up with, reproof and correction? And believe me, I have more reproof and correction than most of you could ever imagine. Because I had to unlearn what the world taught me and get to the word. We chose Christ as our Lord. Say, okay, I seek your approval. That's phileo. And then in order to fulfill that, now I got to do my part, which is what? Agape. I got to change my priorities, my thoughts, my images to conform to his, which is conform to who? God's. So that's when you make Jesus your Lord, what does that make you? I'm here as his slave, not his part-time job person, right? I clock in. Today I'm with God. Okay, 2 hours later, okay, I clock out. That's not how it works. Just like marriage, you get married. All right, it's only a part-time job. No, it's a full-time job. Ask any woman who's married. It is a full-time job. Well, it's only for 12 hours. No, it's for 24 hours. But it only has to be for a couple of years. No, it goes on longer than that. I mean, you've been married. How long have you been a wife? Not Andreas, Alma. How long have you been a wife? Right. So when do you take a break? Oh. All right. How long have you been a mother? How long have you been a mother? All right. So when did you take a break? You never take a break. You don't. It's not even an option. It's a commitment that does not get what? Broken. Is that making sense? The mother has, when she has a child, has a salt, mantle, and blood covenant to that child. The child hasn't even entered the salt covenant yet to his parents. When does it learn that? Well, it first has to learn integrity, not to lie to his mother or father, to do what he's told. And of course, children just automatically obey. No, they don't, right? So we're going to be looking at something, but while they're in that household, how much, if your child was sick, what would you do? Kick them out and get a new one. No, it doesn't work like that. You're responsible for them under your household. So if they're sick, you take care of them. You find out what's wrong, you correct it. Whatever it takes. If they need food, they need clothing. How many parents would go without just so their children would have? That's intense. That's how much it means. Well, the best parent is God. He's also a judge, which makes life exciting. So let's go into Romans really quick. And I want to review a verse that I would say covers the whole Bible. And this is in Romans. And in Romans chapter 8, verse 28. And this is very, very important. I want you all to understand. Right? There'll be two verses I'll give you. Right? So here in verse 28. And we what? We know. Right? Do you ever heard of that we know? Do y'all know what a we know is? You ever had a we know? A we know, right? And what? We know. And every time I'm trying to teach the word, people go, oh, we know. No. There's two words in the koine. One is gnosko, one is what? Oida. Oida is I can imagine it. Gnosko is I've experienced it. This one here is I imagine it. I conceptualize it. And we know, that's conceptualized, that all things work together for good. What's good? Goes back to Genesis. God has it in his mind. He declares it. Then he examines it. And he determines if it's what? Good or not. And we know that all things work what? Together for what? Good. The fulfillment of God's word. As God declares it. To them that agape God. Not phileo, agape. That means they align their thoughts, their priorities, their purposes with God's. To them who are called according to what? His what? Purpose. That's not porpoise, that's a fish. Well, it's not really, it's a mammal. But anyway, it's purpose. What is God's purposes? Isn't that what you're agapeing for? To have the same purposes as God? So if you're aligned with his purposes, God's going to protect you. God's going to be there for you. How often? All the time. Right? Repeat after me. All the time. Right? Some of you aren't repeating me because you don't believe me. Okay. Let's try it again. All the time. Right? God's with you all the time. He's not going to let you go. What mother would say, well, I'm sick and tired of this child. I'm just going to throw out. No, you're kind of stuck with the child. Right? You're not going to let go of that. You're going to be there for that child's needs. It may wander off and, you ever take a child to like Toys R Us? Biggest mistake you could ever do. They just freaking disappear. Like, all right, where'd they go? I would always recommend if you're going to go to Toys R Us, do not take a child with you. Poof, they're gone, right? So they wander off. It's not that you wander off, is that you've got a job, you're doing a purpose, and they're gone. So we know that all things, that no matter what, work together for what? Good, the fulfillment of God's word as he declares it. So how important is God's word? Man shall not live by bread alone, but what? Every word of God. Not what men say, but what the word says. And we know that all things work together for good to them that agape God, right? Have his thoughts, his priorities, his focus, his reality. To them who are called according to what? His what? Purpose. So does God know ahead of time, with all his infinite wisdom, who's gonna flake and who's gonna stand? Yeah. So I'm one of those weirdos. I stick. Freaking like super glue. My decision, right? But anyway, understand. So God, no matter what happens to you, it's all going to be, God's going to turn around for the what? For the good. Now, if you see a parent who has a child, the child does something, doesn't the parent try and figure out a way to make it good? To change it around? To matter what that child does, says, okay, the child tries to cut his hair, and of course he just cuts it wrong. And you go, okay, what are we going to do here? We're going to give you a new hairstyle. And you make it work. You make it fit. They tear their clothes. Hey, let's put some patches on it, make it look cute. But we figure out some way to make it what? Good. All right. So no matter what happens, God already knows ahead of time that you're not that sharp. He already knows you don't have enough wisdom, but he's there to oversee. He's there to help remove all the things that could really hurt you. Now let's go to 1 Corinthians chapter 10. That's very important when you read the word, that these two components are etched in your mind. 1 Corinthians chapter 10. All right. Now, when you tell a child to do something, and they have their own wants, their own desires, and they try and do the absolute minimum requirement and then do what they want. This is where the problem comes in. So there's what God says to do, and then there's where we want to do. And sometimes we get scared, or we get afraid, or we think we're smarter than God. And these are temptations not to do God's what? Word. Is that making sense? We think we already know it. We think we're smarter, or we're filled with emotions or anxiety or fear. And God's already said, don't worry about it. I got you covered. Just do this. Like, well, I don't know. Whatever we want to, just do this. Stay what? Focused. Stay under my shadow. I got you covered. But a lot of times we're smarter. A lot of times our emotions overrun us and we go flying off in different directions. God says, stay in my shadow. So verse 13, there is no temptation. Situations will drive you, come between you and God, to force you away. There's no temptation taking you, such is common to what? Man. Someone else, everybody else has already gone through it. There's hundreds, thousands, millions. People have already gone through it. But God is what? Faithful. It's faithfulness, committed. All right. So when you talk about trust, what is it? What is trust? If I asked you to define what trust is, what would you say? You ever wonder about that? I mean, we use the word trust. So what is it? Why do you say, I don't trust that person? Why? What did they do wrong? No. Confidence? No. I don't trust you anymore. What did they do wrong? They're not consistent with their actions. Okay? Their integrity is gone. So another way to say it is predictability. If you know how they're going to be in every situation, you can what? Trust them. If you never know what they're going to do, then you cannot what? Trust them. Why does God say he magnified his word above his name? Because he's never going to go against his what? His ever. If God said it, he's going to do it. Now, we say things all the time. How many have kept your word? How many have been able to keep what you said you're going to do for the last 48 hours? And didn't go, oops, I'm sorry, I can't. Or I know I said that, but I can't do it. So our integrity isn't worth a powder. God's integrity is so high that no matter what, God's going to be there. So if God says he's going to be there for you, he's going to be there. Whether you acknowledge him or not, he's there. You can either be under his shadow or you can be off in left field, right field, parking lot, whatever. Stay in his what? Shadow. There's no temptation taking you but such as common to man. But God is what? Faithful, predictable. Everybody's God says, well, you never know the will of God. Yes, I do. I got it right here. This is what tells me God will do and what he will not do. Well, I don't want to read that. I just want to go and expect God to do what I want. Who are you? This will come to pass if nobody believes it. God will not change his word. Well, if bad things happen, I'll just pray and then God will change his will. No, he won't. That's why it's so important that God is what? Predictable. Well, how do you know what he's going to do? He tells us. If God expects us to live by every word, then what does he do? He lives by every word. And you know what he's going to do because he's already written it out. And he never goes against it. That's intense. That's what we're supposed to be. Have God's type of integrity. If I say it, I got to do it. Sometimes things go the opposite way, and it makes it impossible for me to do it. I'm still going to do it. Well, it's going to damage you. I'm still going to do it. I said I'm going to do it. I got to do it. Your integrity is not something that you can turn on and off. It's got to be what? Consistent, predictable. Now, this is a situation where I walked into, what was it? I went to go get something. I went to stop and get some food for me and Patricia and some other people. I went in there to buy something, and I handed the person. I mean, it was like I think it was like $9 and something. So I gave him a 50, and he gave me back 2 20s and a 10. Well, that's a 50. So I got it for free. Well, that's not right. I walked out. I was in the car and looked down like, oh, that person didn't take my money. He gave me the wrong what? Change. So I come back there, and I went to talk to I said, look, you gave me the wrong change. They go, you got to talk to the manager. I go, no, you don't understand. No, I got to talk to the manager. Manager comes out and says, sit down over here. So I sit down and he goes, now fill out these papers. I go, look, I'm trying to correct a problem here. He goes, I don't want to hear it until you write it down exactly what it is. I said, you may not want me to do this. He goes, just write it down. Tell me what, you write it down first, and then we'll consider it. I'm like, what are you talking about? Look, I came in, I bought these things, and I gave him a $50 bill. Look, I don't want to hear it. Just write it down. I'm there for a whole hour going through the third degree, trying to give people back their money that they didn't, to make them pay. You know, here's what, you gave me exactly the same amount I gave you back. I can't believe I wasted a whole hour and a half just to do what is what? Right. Anyone else have that problem? That didn't just happen once. That happened like 3 times. People gave me the wrong change. It's like, oh, good gravy. So to keep your integrity is not easy. The whole world thinks that you are way out in left field. The fact that you even mention something that's beneficial to them, they go, oh, you're complaining. Oh, no, I'm not. Will you please take my money? I'm not taking anything. I'm not trying to take away anything. I'm trying to give you what's right. I don't even, oh my goodness. Trying to have integrity is so difficult in this day and time. All you got to do is try, and you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. But anyway, there is no temptation taken to you but such as common to man. But God is what? Faithful, predictable. He will do exactly what his word says. If you don't know God's word, then you have no idea what God's going to do. Who will not suffer. That's the Elizabethan English word for allow. Will not allow you to be tempted above which you are what? Able. But if you think you're not able, with the temptation also make a way to what? Escape, so you can get out of it. If you think it's too much. And that's rough, because a lot of times your brain cells going, oh, I can't handle this. Too much. And you're like, no, I can handle this. God wouldn't put me in this situation unless I can what? All right, repeat after me. God wouldn't allow me in this situation unless I can handle it. Go. There we go. I know it's hard to believe, but God's a lot smarter than all of us put together. God will not put you in a situation you cannot handle. God will not, repeat after me, God will not put me in a situation I cannot handle. So I hold and keep my integrity. But if you think you can't, if you think God's wrong and you're right, God will make a way for you to escape. And you will not grow. And the benefits will no longer be there. Because God, you want to escape? Okay. You don't want to do your job? Okay. All right. Is that making sense? All right. Now let's put it into action. Let's go to Genesis. We're going to read the whole book of Genesis. No, we're not. Everybody makes a mad dash to the door. All right. So in Genesis, chapter 37, it's right after 36. I know it's hard to believe. All right. Now, we're going to learn the story in the account. I don't like to say story because people get the wrong idea. It's the account that he really exists. Yes, they really existed. They really happened. So we're going to look at this. Here we go. Now, understand, how many here now understand what agape is? Everybody understand what agape is? All right. All right. When you hire somebody to do something, what do you want them to do? You want them to think like you, act like you, have the same priorities you do. Yes or no? Right? In other words, you want them to agape you. Does that make sense? They phileoed you by giving you the opportunity to work, but you need to agape them or you're not going to stay in that job. Is that making sense? It's very important that when I teach you the word, if it doesn't make sense, you got to raise your hand. Let me know that things are not as clear as they should be. All right? Because I want you to understand God's word so you can walk in it. You can have the benefits. All right, so here we go. Now, in the Hebrew, it doesn't say the Greek word agape. Why? Because it's a different what? Language. So you can't use, there is no agape in the Old Testament, but there is an equivalent to it, and that's the word aheb, right? All right? So, ready? Aheb. Aheb. It's kind of like you cough in between. Hebrew, it looks like they sound like they're gargling with peanut butter, but that's not true. All right. Now, Israel, that's Jacob. Now, he doesn't say Jacob. It says Israel. From a position of being called of God, he ahabbed Joseph. We're in chapter 37, verse 3. So when you look at, when Peter, right? Peter was an apostle. Jesus Christ called him what? Peter, right? When he was a fisherman, what did he call him? Simon, son of Jonas, right? Jonas just means fisherman, Right? So when Jesus first met him, he called him Simon, son of Jonas. Right? He's the son of a fisherman. But later on, he called him Simon Peter, right? And then just finally Peter. Later on in John, Peter has a hard time because he tries to go back being a fisherman. And he takes all the disciples fishing. He's like, no, that's not what you need to do. And then at that point, he calls him Simon, son of what? Jonas. Why? Because Peter was no longer thinking of himself as what the word says. He went back to thinking of himself as a what? Fisherman. So when it starts with Jacob and then goes to Israel, who called Jacob Israel? God did. So from God's perspective, seeing from God's perspective, he ahabed. He saw God in God's will, God's thoughts, God's priority. In who? In his son, who? Joseph. As Israel, not as Jacob. Because Jacob, when you look at it as a natural father with his sons, he loved his firstborn. But as Israel, as a man of God, he ahabed Joseph. Ahab is the same thing as what? Agape. So he saw Joseph from God's perspective. But his other sons, he saw them as his sons. But Joseph was different. So from God's, having put it on God's perspective, God's reality, then looking at his sons, the only one that shined was who? Joseph. But as a father, it was the eldest and then the others. And Joseph wasn't. But as looking from God's point of view, Joseph. So that's when you see the change in words. God's words, when God speaks, there's a purpose for it. So when he's speaking as Jacob, he's seeing it from a natural man. When he's speaking or acting as Israel, he's walking and acting with a mindset with God's purpose, God's priorities, God's perspective. Does that make sense? Now Israel, doesn't say Jacob, Israel, when he's walking as a man for God. Ahab, Joseph, more than all his what? Children. Because he was the son of his old age. That sounds really stupid. I know it's man, so I choose him. That's not how it works. The word elder means old man. An elder is someone with wisdom. So in all his wisdom, he was precious. The son of his what? Wisdom. All the things he knew and understood about God had no problem in Joseph. The rest of his sons were like, what? But Joseph was able to receive it, and it was his focus. And he made him a coat of what? Many colors. Now that sounds dumb. Why would you want to have a plaid coat? Now let me explain about this. When you look at the 12 sons of Jacob, right? Each one had a different what? Color. Each son had a color assigned to him. And they had their own banners. You read that in Deuteronomy and you see it in Exodus. And they had it on them. In the Middle Ages, you can see that in the fact that people wore the coat of arms that the household they belonged with. And that's when they're out to the field, so you can spot them from a distance, knowing who they are. They didn't have their names written across their check. They had a picture, a graphic, that was their coat of arms. Now, we call it a coat, but it just means anything, a banner, a flag. It's the coat that you wear to identify who you are. So what happened is he wound up with the coat of arms of, or the colors of his brothers on him. So did they go to God? No, they let him go to God for them. So rather than them going to God, you know what? You're much more spiritual than we are. You go to God. So you go to God for me. So his coat of many colors was wearing the colors of all his what? Brethren. He had all the representations of each one of his brothers when he went before God. So not only did he go as himself, but he represented his brothers and God. So they didn't have to do it themselves. They just let him do it. Who's supposed to go to God? Each person is supposed to go to God what? No one comes between you and God. Nobody. You only need to go directly to God. I don't sit there and say, you can't go to God except through me. What are you talking about? My job is to get you to go to who? To God. I've seen God's job. I don't want it. I've seen Christ's job. I don't want that either. You go to God. I will help you get there. I am not taking his place. My job is to teach, instruct, reprove, correct, and help people get closer to who? God. I do not want God's place. Nothing. Who would you want to come between you and your child? You can't see him. You can't touch him. You can't speak to him. You have to go through an interpreter, and they're separated from him. And then the interpreter and their child is over there, and you're away from them. That's bullshit. Manure. Basuda. Asuda. Whatever. So, is this making sense? What do you want to come between you and your child? Absolutely what? Nothing. So what does God want to come between him and you? Nothing. Now you may have tutors and governors, but you need to have someone to oversee you to help you be your best. But God is the one in charge. Does that make sense? All right. So here the brothers go, well, you're more spiritual than I. Why don't you just take my job? You go see God. And what was really bad is he did it for his father and mother too. So he goes to God, and God's like, okay, where's the rest of your family? It was only what? Joseph. That's intense. And when the brethren saw that their father Ahab gave him more privileges, more than all his brethren, they hated him. Oh my gosh, they hated him. Why? Because of what he was doing, he got the what? The benefits. And they were jealous of the benefits. All they had to do was do what he's doing. And they hated him and could not speak peaceably unto him. Well, that's just ducky. How many have brothers and sisters? How many have brothers and sisters that are older than you? How many have been harassed by your brothers and sisters? My brother loved me, okay? My brother loved me. He put snakes in my bed while I went to sleep. My brother loved me. He put super glue in, epoxy it was called then. It wasn't called super glue, it was called epoxy, in my shoes. I had to go to the hospital to have my shoes removed. My brother loved me. Am I telling you how much he loved me? Now, if he'd hated me, oh my gosh, there'd be some real problems. But he loved me. He threw a brick and hit me in the forehead. That's okay, because I punched him and broke his rib. But that's beside the point. I love him too, right? So boys have a really unique way of showing their love. But this is different. They hated him. Imagine if my brother hated me. The snakes in the bed would not have been garter snakes. They would have been like rattlesnakes. Right? The super glue in my shoes may have been cement, you know. So anyway, Joseph dreamed a dream. All right? Now that word there, dreamed a dream, is in it. He got guidance. God showed him. Dreams, you can't go by dreams. If you're all your heart, all your soul, all your mind is for God, then yes, you might get dreams that are from God. But if your heart is not 100% for God, and you've been watching movies, you're going to think about the movies. Someone called me up and said, oh my God, Frank, I had such nightmares, you know. All right. So did you watch anything? Oh yeah, I went to a horror movie. Well, maybe that had an effect, right? Anything in that movie happened in your dream? Oh yeah. Well, don't go those movies no more. So people say, was that God talking to me? No, it's just stupid watching the dumb movies. So when people say, well, I had a dream, well, what did you watch on television and movies in the last couple of days? Then we'll be able to tell what exactly your dream is. So when all your heart, all your soul, all your mind is only for God, then the dreams will have significance. In any way, shape, or form, they're not. I doubt any spiritual perception with that. So here we go. And verse 5, and Joseph dreamed a what? A dream. They got revelation, right? Because it's of God, because his heart, his soul, and the mind is on that. And he told it to his brethren, and they hated him yet the more. He said, hear me, verse 6, I pray you, this dream which I have dreamed. It's a vision he receives. For behold, we were binding sheaves in the field, and lo, my sheaf, that's his labors, arose and also stood upright. And behold, your sheaves, your labors of your life is what it means, stood round about and made what? Obstinance. That's not a bad word. That just means they bowed down. They credited his above theirs. It just, all their labors are going to be in service to him. And his brethren said unto him, shall thou indeed reign over us? And that's exactly what that means. Or shall thou indeed have dominion over us? And they hated him yet the more for his dreams and for his words. Now, when you have 11 brothers who hate your guts, and they're all older than you, what do you think is going to happen? Dreamed yet another dream, and told to his brethren, behold, I have dreamed a dream more, and behold, the sun and the moon. That represents his father and his mother. And the 11 stars, that's his brothers, made obstinance to me. You bowed down to me. And he told to his father and to his brethren. And his father rebuked him and said, what is this dream that thou hast dreamed? Shall I and thy mother and thy brethren indeed come to bow down ourselves to thee to the ground? Now, if this is of God, it has to what? Come to pass. If God said it, it has to come to pass. God's committed to his word. God has integrity. You can trust God because he is what? Predictable. Are you predictable? Do you have integrity? And his brethren envied him, and his father observed the saying. So anyway, his brothers hate him, right? They're not going to put super glue in his shoe. They're not going to put snakes in his bed like my brother did. They're going to do far worse. Verse 18, and when they saw him afar off, even before he came near unto them, they conspired against to what? Slay him. Now, is Joseph in the shadow of God? Yes or no? No matter what happens to him, it's all going to be for the what? Because he's in the shadow of God. Yes or no? How many have had bad things happen to you, but then what happens out of it is even better than what it was before? That's being in the shadow of God. If it hasn't happened to you, then you need to stick more to the word. And you watch God do it. Verse 19. And they said one to another, behold, this dreamer cometh. Come now, therefore, let us slay him. Now that's a loving brother, isn't it? Let us what? Slay him, kill him, and cast him into some pit. And we will say some evil beast had devoured him, and we shall see what shall become of his dreams. Now the eldest, Reuben, which his father loved, not agape, but loved, that's Reuben, heard it. He delivered them out of their hands, and he said, let us not kill him. Reuben said unto them, shed no blood, but cast him into this pit that is in the wilderness, and lay no hand upon him. Why did he say that? That he might rid him out of their hands to deliver him to his father again. Verse 23, and it came to pass when Joseph was come unto his brethren, that they stripped Joseph of his coat. What did his coat do? Represent every member of his what? Family. And his coat of many colors was upon him. And they took him and cast him into a pit, and the pit was empty, and there was no water in it. That's kind of a good thing. And they sat down to eat bread, and they lifted up their eyes and looked, and behold, a company of Ishmaelites came from Gilead with their camels, bearing spicery and balm and myrrh, going down to carry it to where? Egypt. And Judah said unto his brethren, what profit is it, if we slay our brethren and conceal his blood? Come, let us sell him to the what? Ishmaelites. And let him not our hand be upon him, for he's our brother and our flesh. What a loving brother. And his brethren were content. Then passed by the what? Midians. Now, how did we get from Ishmaelites to Midianites? The people that were in charge of the caravans going from one place to another are the Ishmaelites. Members that are of that group are called Midians. These are people that deal in sales, trade. What specifically do they trade in? They provide people with skills. They are those who train people to be aides. They treat people to be azirs. They train people to be skilled in something, mathematics, skilled in writing, skilled in whatever. But their primary best knowledge is those who are going to be azirs, to be overseers over other things. You find that the Midianites and the Magi come from the Midians. So the best of the Midians are the Magi. So they teach people how to be able to supervise, to oversee. They teach them how to read, how to write. They teach them skills. Everything is taught to their pupils. And then they sell that person with their skills. So who bought him? The Midianites will take him. And they became one of their members. So he'll change his garment to be under the training and skill of a Midianite. His utmost would be to become a Magi. But that doesn't say anything about it, so I don't know. But the Midianites and the Magi are linked. Are all Magi Midianites? They're all trained by Midianites. They all began their training there. Are all Midianites Magi? No, but they were trained. It's all about what? Training. All right, here we go. So if it was an Ishmaelite, he's in sad shape. But if a Midianite gets a hold of him and trains him, whoa. So now he's sold into slavery. If you wound up being sold into slavery, would you feel that was a bad deal? How many would feel that was like really a bad day? Right? You woke up in the morning, all of a sudden your brothers try and kill you, and then instead of killing you, they throw you and they sell you to be a slave. How many would feel that was a bad day? Okay, that was a bad day, right? But all things work to the what? To the good of them that what? Agape God. Yes or no? All right, here we go. Go to 39. Now, this is about a couple of years later. He's been trained for about maybe a year, 2 years. And there's a lot of training going on. Now, understand that Egypt's not that far away, but his training took a lot. You have to basically remove anyone's attachment to what they had before. When there's a war, someone's captured, they shave their heads, they make them carry only a loincloth, their clothes are taken from them. They have to learn to be re-identified and reassociated. Training as a slave or as in any training, how many of you ever, if you know anyone who went in the Marine Corps, they treat you like what? If you go to boot camp, they shave your what? Their head. All your clothes you have are taken away. You have no identity whatsoever. They reestablish your what? Identity. Same thing happened to slaves. People are going to be slaves. People are going to be what, in any respect, a slave. They have to have whatever they used to be forgotten. They have to rebuild their identity. So now he's being trained by the Midianites, same people that trained those who wish to be Magi. So here we go. Chapter 39, verse 1. And Joseph was brought down to Egypt, and Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, captain of the guard, an Egyptian, bought him of the hands of the what? Ishmaelites. The Midianites trained him. The Ishmaelites are the ones who sell, which have brought him down thither. And the Lord, verse 2, now listen carefully. Verse 2, and the Lord was with what? Joseph. Why? Why was he with Joseph? God looks at the what? Heart. He has the same heart, same priorities, same focus as God. So where's God? With him. And he was prosperous man. And he was in the house of the master, his what? So here he's a slave, and God makes him what? Prosperous. Verse 3, every time he touched something, it would be prosperous. And his master saw, remember he's a slave now, his master saw that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord made all that he did to prosper in his hand. Now, there's this word grace in the Old Testament, not the same word as in the New Testament. And Joseph found grace, and that means identity, right? Still the same word, but it means identity, the Hebrew word. He found in Joseph that he's not normal. Joseph is not normal. He has something special. There's something about him. He's not just a normal human being. Somebody else is there. You understand? He's recognizing it. You have God. And he served him and made him overseer over his house, over all that he had, and put it into his what? He let him have what? Everything. It's your call, however you want to do anything. Now that's intense. Why? Because he had he had God's focus, God's priority, and he saw things from God's perspective, and he acted. And who can complain about that? So I'll tell you what, you've taken care of this, now I want this, and take care of this, and he gave him the whole enchilada, right? The whole thing, everything, all my job. In fact, he didn't have to do anything. Joseph did what? All of it. And it was in better condition and better than if he had done it himself. Made him overseer over his house, over all that he had, he put in his hands. Verse 5, and it came to pass from that time that he made him overseer over his house and over all that he had, that the Lord blessed the Egyptian's house. For whose sake? So what will God protect? If you stand for God and you carry out God's will to be your best for God, God will not only protect you, but everybody what? Else that you're responsible for. So you have to just stay focused on God. God handles everything else. Does it work like that? Yep. And the blessing of the Lord was upon all that he had in the house and in the field. Why? Because Potiphar was so hot? No. Because of Joseph. Everything changes. Everyone changes. Everything around you changes when you put God first. And verse 6, and he left what? All that he had in who? Joseph's hands. And he knew not what he had, save the bread which he should eat. And Joseph was, there it is, a goodly, no, that word good tells you, take it back to Genesis. He was there to bring to pass God's will, God's purposes. And was well what? Favored. He was growing, developing, and to that even getting better and better and better. Well, it's just because I show up. No, you have to learn. You have to practice. You're going to make mistakes. You make sure you learn and you take responsibility. This went wrong. It's my fault. I'm responsible. Don't say it's your fault. I'm responsible. I'll make sure it doesn't happen again. I take responsibility for what's given to me. It's my responsibility. Well, this happened. Okay, I'll try and figure out how to not let it happen again. I'll take responsibility. And San Diego, who's responsible for your lives? I am. Who's responsible for her? I am. Who's responsible for you? I am. God put you in my life, I'm responsible for you. I can do more if you're in my household, but you're not. So I'm kind of stuck with what you can allow me to work in. But I'm responsible to God for every one of you. Wow. Verse 7. And it came to pass after these things that his master's wife cast her eyes upon Joseph. And she said, lie with me. So she didn't like telling the truth. Is that what we're talking about? Now understand, this is a young lady. I know Potiphar is older, but usually men that are in their 40s or 50s marry girls that are like 18, 20 years of age. So she's not exactly ugly. And Joseph is about 20 some years of age. Maybe just about before, not quite 30 yet. Because he's 17 when he gets thrown into slavery, so maybe he's in his 20s. So she looked at him and said, hey, lie with me. So I don't think she means, let's tell fibs together. I think she had more in mind. But anyway, and he what? Refused. Now this is not an ugly woman. She's about the most beautiful woman that you can find in Egypt. And he went, nope, 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 nope. Behold, my master will not what is with me in the house, and he has committed all that he hath to my hand. There is none greater in this house than I. Neither hath he kept back anything from me but thee, because thou art his wife. How then can I do this great what? Wickedness and sin against Potiphar? No. Sin against who? So how is he looking at this? That who put it in his hands? All his responsibilities belong to who? He's being the administrator, not for Potiphar, but for who? God. So if you look at everything that's put in your hands as belonging to God, and God gave it to you to do, how are you going to treat it? What kind of effort are you going to put behind it? So this changes everything when you realize you're not working for an employer, you're working for who? For God. That changes everything. So that if I don't have to do anything because the boss ain't watching. Believe me, the boss is watching. You want to get a promotion by the boss? Do a good job. Doesn't matter who's looking, because God's already watching. And if he can trust you and you have integrity, then God's going to give you what? More. If you don't have integrity and you're just trying to be a man pleaser, God's going to say, well, nuts to you. I'll wait for someone else and I'll put him in charge. Is that making sense? Who do you work for? Who put this responsibility in your hands? What kind of effort you're going to put behind it? So blowing it is not going to work because you have to stand and prove before who? Not man, God. So when God says, okay, how'd you do today? You were watching? Yeah, I was watching. Verse 10, and it came to pass as she spoke to Joseph day by day. That would be intense. Was he a eunuch? No, he was fully equipped. Okay. That he hearkened not unto her to lie with her, nor to be with her. She wanted him to lie, he wouldn't lie. Okay. I'm trying to be nice for those who have kids present. Verse 11. And it came to pass about this time that Joseph went into the house to do his business, and there was none of the men of the house there within. And she caught him by his garment, saying, lie with me. Now that's very blunt. And he left his garment in her hand and fled and got him out. And it came to pass when she saw that he had left his garment in her hand and was fled forth, that she called all the men of the house and spoke to them, saying, see, he hath brought a Hebrew unto us to mock us. He came in unto me to lie with me, and I cried with a loud voice. Yeah, right. And of course, everybody believed her, right? And it came to pass when I heard that I lifted up my voice and cried that he left his garment with me and fled and got him out. And she laid up his garment by her until her Lord came home. And she spoke unto him according to these words, saying, the Hebrew servant which thou brought unto us came unto me to mock. Why is she saying this? Because she's afraid he might tell. So first to nail him first. Notice she's accusing him of the very thing she's guilty of. Verse 18, and it came to pass as I lifted my voice up and cried that he left his garment with me and fled out. It came to pass when his master heard the words of his wife, which she spoke unto him, saying, after this manner did the servant unto me, that his wrath was kindled. And Joseph's master took him and put him in the prison, a place where the king's prisoners were bound. And he was there in the prison. This is where you get put to death. This is the last place you go before they kill you. There's a judgment. You're put in the prison until your time of judgment. All right, so now you start off in a family of 12. Your brothers try and kill you. Are you having a bad day? Yes, they try and kill you. They sell you into slavery. Is that a good thing? No, you've had a rough day. All right, you get in charge of Potiphar's whole hacienda, right? The whole hacienda is yours. You take care of everything. And his wife decides to endeavor to persuade you, right? And she forces herself on you, which that's like, okay. And he denies her, and she calls RAPE. Of course, she can't lie, so he gets taken and thrown into the prison. Now you're in prison. Now what? Question is, are you alone? God makes all things work to the what? The good. The fulfillment of God's will. All right, here we go. So now he's thrown into what? Prison. Where's God? It depends on where his heart, his soul, his mind is. Is he still in the shadow of God? And he was there in the prison. Verse 21. But the Lord was with Joseph and showed him what? Mercy. The word mercy is to see from God's what? Well, who's seeing from God's perspective? He gave him favor in the sight of the keeper of the prison. The keeper of the prison recognized this guy's not normal. There's something about him that cannot be denied. And the keeper of the prison committed to Joseph's hands all the prisoners that were in the prison. Wait a minute. Who's in charge of the prison? A prisoner? No, Joseph. Well, he's a prisoner. He's up to be executed. Yeah? But obviously, this is a bad call, because there's no doubt that he is of what? God. So the prisoner wanted, the master of the prison wanted to make sure that everything was right, so he put it in Joseph's hands, because Joseph could do a better job than him. Who do you put in charge of your responsibilities if someone can do it better than you? You give it to them. How many have the ability to be just like that? Every one of you. What's the secret? To ensure that it's not someone who put it in your hands. Who put it in your hands? God did. God gave you that responsibility. You're working for who? For God. It doesn't matter what people think. You give your utmost. You stand approved before who? God. You deliver it to him for judgment. No one else. You keep your what? Integrity. Verse 22, and the keeper of the prison committed. Now, this didn't happen in 24 hours. This took time. How many have ever seen the movie Shawshank Redemption? There's a man, same thing. The whole prison was in his hands. It was 20 years in there. So that's Shawshank Redemption. Watch it. It's really good. It helps you see a man who comes in as a prisoner and winds up in charge of the whole place. So it's pretty cool. Anyway, So I just want you to understand, it didn't happen. He walked in and go, oh, I'm going to put you. No, you wouldn't put your whole prison in charge of someone who's a prisoner. He'd have to really prove himself to be what? Extraordinary. So whatsoever they did, okay, verse 22, and the keeper of the prison committed to Joseph's hands all the prisoners that were in the prison. And whatsoever they did there, he was the what? Who was the doer of it? Joseph. Well, whose idea was this? Joseph's. Why are you doing this? Joseph said to do it. Joseph was the doer of what? All of it. Why? Because only one person took responsibility for everything. Well, this went wrong. Joseph says, I'll take responsibility for it. Well, this happened. I'll take responsibility for it. And he wound up in charge of what? Everything. You want to be in charge where you're at? Take responsibility for everything. Don't pass it off. Well, it's not my fault. Are you in charge? Yes or no? If you're in charge, then you take responsibility. And if you take responsibility, the owner will say, is anybody here responsible? Who did this? I don't know. Someone else, not me. Look, I'll take responsibility for it. Person says, you will? Yes, I'll take responsibility. Okay, you oversee it. Take what? Responsibility. Who gives it to you? God does. Who will take care of you? Who will protect you while you take that responsibility? God will. Does that make sense? And the keeper of the prison committed to Joseph's hands all the prisoners that were in the prison. And whatsoever they did there, he was a doer of it. And the keeper of the prison looked not on anything that was under his hand, because the Lord was with him, that which he did. And Lord made it to what? That whole prison prospered. No problems, no sickness, no disease. Beautiful place. And he went from, now he's a prisoner. And he handled the prison as a prisoner, as if he was, God owned it. He had integrity that would not be, you couldn't budge him. Verse 40, chapter 40, verse 1. And it came to pass after these things that the butler of the king of Egypt and his baker had offended their lord, the king of Egypt. And the Pharaoh was wroth against two of his officers, against the chief of the butlers and against the chief of the baker. And he put them in ward in the house of the captain of the guard into the prison, the place where Joseph was. Now these two men are now whose responsibility? Joseph's. And he's going to treat them with the same responsibility. Verse 4, and the captain of the guard charged Joseph with them, and he served them, and they continued the season in the ward. So he's treating them as if God put them under his hand. And they dreamed a dream, both of them, each man his dream in one night, each man according to the interpretation of his dream, the butler and the baker of the king of Egypt. And they were bound in the prison. And Joseph came in unto them in the morning, and looked upon them, and behold, they were sad. And he asked Pharaoh's officers that were with him in the ward of his lord's house, saying, wherefore look ye sad today? And they said unto him, we dreamed a dream, and there's none to interpret of it. And Joseph said unto them, ready? I can do it. Well, if God gave him the dream, then God's going to have to what? Interpret it. And Joseph said unto him, do not interpretations belong to who? God. Tell me them, I pray you. And the chief butler told his dream to Joseph, and said to him, in my dream, behold, a vine was before me, and the vine was 3 branches, and it was as though it budded, and her blossoms shone forth, and the clusters of thereof brought forth ripe grapes. Pharaoh's cup was in my hand. I took the grapes and pressed them into Pharaoh's cup, and I gave the cup unto Pharaoh's hand. Joseph said unto him, this is the interpretation of it. The 3 branches are 3 days. Yet within 3 days shall Pharaoh lift up thy head and restore thee unto thy place. And thou shalt deliver Pharaoh's cup into his hand after the former manner in which thou wast his butler. And the crowd goes wild. Yeah. Now, understand what a baker is one that takes the grain and makes sure it's ground. You grind it between rocks. Sometimes the pieces of the rock fall into the grain. And you're supposed to take all the rocks what? Out. If you've ever bitten down on a rock, it'll crack your what? So if you don't take the little grains of rock out of there, and you're not attentive to detail, and you're not responsible, then someone is going to bite down on your bread, and it's going to break their what? And they have archaeologists have found pharaohs that have their teeth all broken and cracked. Someone didn't take care of the bread that was made. So here we go. We're in verse what? 14. But think on me, okay. Think on me when it shall be well with thee, and show kindness, I pray thee, unto me, and make mention of me unto Pharaoh, and bring me out of this house. For indeed I was stolen away out of the land of Hebrews, and here also I have done nothing that they should put me in this dungeon. When the chief baker saw that the interpretation was good, he said to Joseph, I also have dreamed a dream. Me too. I had 3 white baskets. What does white mean? On my head. And the uppermost basket there was all manner of meats for the Pharaoh. And the birds did eat them out of the baskets upon my what? Head. This is not good symbolism. Joseph answered and said, this is the interpretation thereof. In the 3 baskets are 3 days. Yet within 3 days shall the Pharaoh lift up thy head from off of thee, and shall hang thee on a tree. And the birds shall eat thy flesh from off of thee. This is not a good thing. Well, aren't you always supposed to say nice things to people? No, you're supposed to tell them the truth. Well, people aren't going to like you if you tell the truth. Well, then don't ask me the stupid question. I won't tell you the truth. If you ask me, I've got to tell you the truth. It came to pass at the 3rd day, which was Pharaoh's birthday, they made a feast to all his servants, and he lifted up the head of the chief butler and of the chief baker among his servants. He restored the chief butler to his butlership again, and he gave the cup unto Pharaoh. But he hanged the chief baker, as Joseph had interpreted to them. And yet did not the chief butler remember Joseph. Well, that sucks. So what would you do? What would you do? He forgot about you. Whoa! What are you going to do? God's timing is what? Perfect. Where's God? Working in this situation, is he not? All things work to the what? Well, he didn't notify anybody. That's okay. That's all right. Who's got it? Is he doing his part? Yes. God's doing what? His part. The time will be just what? Right. Now, here we go. Chapter 41. And it came to pass at the end of 2 full years. 2 full years. He's been in that prison a long time. So Pharaoh dreamed. And behold, he stood by the river. And behold, there came up out of the river 7 well-favored kine. That's cattle. And fat flesh. They were pretty heavy. And they fed in a meadow. And behold, 7 other kine, cattle, came up out after them out of the river, ill-favored and lean-fleshed, and stood by the other kine upon the brink of the river. And the ill-favored and lean-fleshed kine did eat up the 7 well-favored and fat kine. So Pharaoh woke. Now, he doesn't have one like this. He has several of them. And he's freaking out about this dream. And it was so real, so, like as real as can be. So And he has a dream about ears of corn that have the same problem. 7 ears of corn, the 7 blasted ones, and the 7 rank. And that 1 good ears ate up the bad ears. The 1 bad ears ate up the good. Came to pass in the morning that his spirit was troubled, and he sent and called all the magicians of Egypt, and all the wise men thereof, and Pharaoh told them his dream, but there was none that could interpret them unto Pharaoh. Tell me what this means. They had no idea. None whatsoever. Then spoke the chief butler unto Pharaoh, saying, I do remember my faults this day. Pharaoh was wroth with me, with his servants, and put me in the ward of the captain of the guard's house, both me and the chief baker. And we dreamed a dream one night, he and I and he, and we dreamed each man according to the interpretation of his dream. And there was there a young man, a Hebrew, servant of the captain of the guard, and we told him, and he interpreted to us our dreams. Each man according to his dream did he interpret. Came to pass as he interpreted to us, so it was. Me he restored to my office, and him he hanged. Then Pharaoh sent and called Joseph, and they brought him hastily out of the dungeon. So what did he do? He's in his prison clothes. He shows up to Pharaoh. No. You're going to come before, you got to think. You got to have wisdom. Who are you going before? How do you dress? You don't just, you got to take me the way I am. No, God's putting you in a situation. God, you've got to think it through. Every one of you is going to be given a challenge. Every one of you is going to be put in a position of authority. Who are you trying to please? Men or God? Who are you standing approval for? Have integrity. Don't budge. God puts it in your hands. You're responsible to God for it. Treat it with the utmost of respect. Give it your maximum effort. So, what did he do? And he shaved himself. He shaved. He took off his beard. No. And the hierarchy in Egypt have no hair on their bodies whatsoever. All hair is removed. And that includes eyebrows, hair, pubic, no hair on your body anywhere. So when he shaved himself, he didn't mess around. No. Shaved. All shaved. Or scraped, if you want to call it scraped. They used to sharpen seashells and use those to shave with. All right, so I'm in verse 14. Thank you. Then Pharaoh sent and called Joseph, and he came and changed his what? Made sure that he wore white linen. Come before Pharaoh. And Pharaoh said unto Joseph, I have dreamed a dream, and I have heard that thou can interpret and dream and interpret it. And Joseph answered Pharaoh and said, it's not in me. God shall give Pharaoh an answer of what? And you'll know that it is true. Pharaoh said unto Joseph, in my dream, behold, I stood by the bank of the river. And he tells him the story again. Verse 25. And Pharaoh said unto Joseph, the dream of Pharaoh is one, both dreams. God has showed Pharaoh what he is allowing to come to pass. In the Eastern culture, if you allow it, then it comes from you. When Joseph allowed something, it came from him. If he has the power to stop it and does it, then he allowed it. So it doesn't God didn't do it. God allowed it to happen. And in allowing it, you are the one responsible. The 7 good kine are 7 years. The 7 good ears are 7 years. The dream is one. Verse 28. This is the thing which I have spoken unto Pharaoh. God is about to do. He has showed unto Pharaoh. Behold, there come 7 years of great plenty throughout all the land of Egypt. And there shall arise after them 7 years of what? Famine. And all the plenty shall be forgotten in the land of Egypt, but the famine shall consume the land. Understand, these are cycles. The United States has had cycles. The last 7 years were abundance. This is now the 7 years of what? Famine. These are the cycles we go through. There's always an abundance. You take that abundance, you save it for the times of what? Famine. All cycles have to go through this. You can trace the whole United States back to its beginning. It still has the same cycles. So have we had much years of abundance? Now we're going to have years of what? It's just the way it is. You don't need a crystal ball to see that. The Bible is still the same. You go through all history. There's tremendous abundance, and there's what? Nothing. Then it starts going up to, then it has abundance again. You need something to carry you through the bad times. That's why for the last 10 years I've been telling everybody what? Put aside, put aside, put aside. This great abundance cannot last. It has to what? We have to go to the negative. You start off with spring, then summer, then fall, then what? Winter. Then spring, then summer, then fall, then what? Winter. It's the cycle that everything goes through. You cannot break the cycles. They're historically accurate and precise. All right, 32. And plenty shall be known in the land by reason of that famine. So all the plenty that came is all going to be like never happened. For it shall be very grievous. For that the dream was doubled unto Pharaoh twice is because the thing is established by who? God. And God will shortly bring it to what? To pass. Now therefore, he says, let Pharaoh look out a man, discreet and wise, and set him over the land of what? Egypt. Let Pharaoh do this. Let him appoint officers over the land. Take up a fifth of the part of the land of Egypt in the 7 plenteous years. That sounds like a storehouse. That's right. And let them gather all the food of those good years that come and lay up corn under the hand of Pharaoh, and let them keep food in the cities. That the food shall be for store in the land against the 7 years of what? Famine, which shall be in the land of Egypt, that the land perish not through the famine. And the thing was, now if you're Pharaoh, who are you going to choose? Joseph says you need to find someone who's wise, who's knowledgeable, who's skilled, someone who understands these things, and set him over the land. Pharaoh goes, you know, I'm just thinking of somebody. Looks just like you. Who would you choose? Verse 37. And the thing was good in the eyes of Pharaoh and in the eyes of all his servants. Remember, he started off as a shepherd, a herdsman for his family. Now what is he about to be? He got thrown in prison. He was a slave. Where is he at now? What did I teach you? All things work to the what? Good of those that agape God. You want to know your future? It's going to blow your doors off. You're going to be the most awesome people there is. Put God first. Walk in his shadow. Anything that's put in your hands, treat as if God himself, which he did, gave it to you. Verse 32. And for the dream was doubled unto Pharaoh twice, is because the thing is, verse 32. All right. I just want to bring that account. Is established by God, and God will surely bring it to pass. We're down to 38. The thing, verse 37, the thing was good in the eyes of Pharaoh and in the eyes of his servants. Pharaoh said unto his servants, can we find such a one as this? A man in whom is the Spirit of God? Who says that about you? Everybody should. But you got to have integrity. People got to learn to trust you. How do they trust you? Because you're dependable. What else? You take responsibility. What else? You're predictable. They know exactly what you will do, how you will do it, without a doubt. You've got to do it as if the job was given to you by who? God. And God gave you that and put it in your hands. You treat it as if, and in fact, God gave it to you. God will open up doors, make your life awesome, and he will continue to give you more and more responsibility as you handle it correctly. Can we find such a man as this? A man in whom the spirit of who? God is? Pharaoh said unto Joseph, for as much as God has showed you this, there is none so discreet and wise as thou art. Thou shalt be over my house, according to all the word which thy people shall be ruled. Only the throne will I be better than. What is he saying he's going to make him? He's going to be the same as Pharaoh. He's going to be Pharaoh's what? Azir. Second in command. And Pharaoh said unto Joseph, see, I have set thee over all the land of Egypt. And Pharaoh took off the ring. That's his signet ring. He declares something and he says it is. The authority and power of the Pharaoh is now in whose hands? Joseph's. Put it on Joseph's hands and arrayed him in vesture of fine linen. And who wears fine linen? Pharaoh. And put a gold what? Who wears the gold chain? The one in charge. About his neck. And he made him to ride in the second chariot. Wait a minute. Pharaoh's chariot? And they cried before him, bowed the knee, and made him ruler over all the land of Egypt. And Pharaoh said unto Joseph, I am Pharaoh, and without thee shall no man lift up his hand nor foot in all the land of Egypt. Verse 46. And Joseph was what? 30 years old when he stood before the Pharaoh, king of Egypt. 30 years of age. From 17 to 30. He went through hell. And God, he handled it without any doubt, worry, or fear. He handled it and he walked with God in every situation. He would not let go of his integrity. He stood. He would not budge. And God took care of him. He stayed in God's what? Shadow. Now let's go back to that verse in Romans. And in Romans chapter 8, verse 28, now you know, oida. And that's what that verse says. You know. Now you're going to experience it. And we know we conceptualize. I just taught you, so you conceptualize your life where everything goes perfectly for you. It's rough. You have problems. You have challenges, but it always comes out in the end. It always fulfills God's will. You stay focused. You do your job. God will do what? His. Now repeat after me. And we know. Say it. And we know. Ready? That all things. How many is that? All work together for what? Good. Bringing to pass God's will. To them that agape God. To them that are called according to the purpose of who? God. Is that you? Then you have got one awesome future. Are you going to have challenges? Yes. Are you going to overcome them? Absolutely. Why? Because you are God's what? Best. God bless you.